Well, hey there, HVAC pros and enthusiasts. Are you ready to take your skills to the next level? The HVACR Learning Network has just launched an exciting new e-learning course, High Performance Heat Pumps. And guess what? We're giving you free access to the first 2 chapters. Whether you're in the field, training for that next step, or simply want to sharpen your expertise, this course is packed with everything you need to understand and master high-performance heat pump systems, especially inverter-driven cold climate heat pumps. And the best part? You can access it anytime, anywhere, right from your favorite mobile device. It's HVACR learning made flexible and convenient for you. So what are you waiting for? Click the link. Dive into the HVACR Learning Network and start your free trial today. Your journey to HVACR mastery begins here. Well, hello, HVAC pros and enthusiasts. How's everyone doing today? We're so grateful to have you here on Did You Know, the ESCO HVAC show. So we've been out on the road doing some traveling. I've got a little congestion going on. Seems like every time I go out for a flight, I end up with something. Now, everyone, let us know where you're joining in from. We'd love to know how large this community of HVAC and refrigeration is growing. And so today we've got some very special friends and guests from the industry. We've got Jason Esteves. How are you, sir?
Very good. Yourself?
I'm doing great. Dan Kelly, how are you?
Doing well, Clifton. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. You know,
Good.
we just did a podcast last week, so that thing will be airing probably next Friday. That one's in post-edit right now. We're going to be diving into some combustion things as well on the podcast. Todd, thanks for joining us today. Glad to have you here. Hey, how's the weather out in California?
Most likely better than here.
Probably good.
Probably sunny. Todd's on here like all the time with us. Great, friend on the show, and we're always like, "Oh, it's miserable. We got it's pouring down rain or it's snowing." And yeah, Kendrick, you're like me. You know what's going on weather-wise. Like Kendrick's over in Chicago, and we're like, "It's snowing. It's miserable." Todd's like, "It's like 80 degrees. The sun's shining. The fruit trees are blossoming."
Yeah.
Sounds nice.
Yeah, it sounds actually pretty nice. Even though we're in spring, it doesn't feel like it right now.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Howard, thanks for joining in from Denver. Glad that you're hanging out with us. Oh, it's hot. Okay. Well, you know what? So I was down in Texas, Howard, and most of our team was actually down in Texas last week. We spent almost the entire week at Daikin, and it was miserable. It was like 97, 98 degrees. So they were saying that was, typical summer weather. Hey, Katie, thanks for joining us. Summer weather for, the spring. So it was exceptionally hot, 90 degrees. Yeah, that is pretty warm. Well, speaking of heat, we're going to talk about something warm today. So let's talk a little bit about the theory of combustion and especially the analysis of that. I hate saying back in my day, but because it makes me feel old, but then at the same time, I feel like I'm seasoned and I've earned the right to say back in my day.
Yeah, sure. I'm starting to get to that point myself, by the way.
Well, for those here, particularly in the Midwest, when I was growing up into this industry back in the 90s, we had a lot of ribbon burner furnaces. And for those that haven't worked on a ribbon burner, they're just long burners, right? Natural draft, many of them have an air shutter. And at the time, we were taught that you clean everything up really well, right? Clean the flue, clean the heat exchanger, clean the burners, clean orifices, get everything back, check your gas manifold pressure, check your fan speed, fire the thing up, and then you adjust your air shutters until you get a nice little fine blue cone. And when you got to a cone, that was when we were burning hot enough and we should be efficient. We didn't have anything to really analyze it with. We did have some gas analysis, but we primarily used that for oil burners. We didn't really use it for gas burners at the time. But things have changed so drastically, and Seitron's at the forefront of understanding combustion, doing classes. They actually now have the Seitron Americas Academy. Jason, tell us a little bit about what's going on at Seitron before we dive into this, so people are aware of training and opportunities that's available to them.
Sure. Well, I appreciate that. I mean, I have been doing combustion analysis training for aging myself, because same thing, right? Like back in my day, I learned on the old wet kit. For those of you we're on the East Coast, so a lot of oil.
A lot of oil.
That's how I had to learn, so I could understand the electronic part of it. Seitron, been making analyzers for over 40 years. And it was always a goal of mine. And one of the things that, we talked about a little bit on the previous podcast was there are three aspects to what we do for a living. One is product, of course, right? We're a manufacturer at the end of the day. We would like to sell product, but you have to differentiate your product. And the differentiating that we do is not based solely on product. It's the support and the training.
Right.
We answer calls. Dan, you can suffice to this. I mean, weekends, evenings, holidays, we will answer your call. Nobody usually calls us to say, hey, I got this big, beautiful, nice blue flame, so I'm good, right? And usually it'll be, what the hell is happening? But training is really something that we take a lot of pride in, a lot. When we moved to our new facility, we're based in Newtown, which is Bucks County. We're a little outside of Philadelphia here. One of the first things I wanted to do was put in a training academy. And we have live fire equipment here. And we even though we're a manufacturer, we try to get all of our training certified, whether it's through NATE or NORA or anything like that. So it's accredited training. So it's not, techs don't feel like it's another sales presentation. It's not. It's an actual training. And we spend a lot of time, Dan and I especially, in the field with technicians, whether they're doing gas or oil or propane or wood or coal or biofuels. And we try to understand what the issues they are seeing, some of the things that are happening. And we really do, even when we get into some accounts, I mean, we try to sell equipment, right? But we'll tell customers, don't buy a Seitron if you don't want to do the training with us, because that's our differentiating factor. We'll go to you, we'll fly to you, you could come to us. But training is a big portion of our business. And what is O2? What is CO? What are all these aspects in combustion? What is the flame? I have this joke in our class, like if you ever call me at 7 p.m. and you tell me about the color of the flame, I'm going to hang up the phone because that shit doesn't mean anything to me.
Right.
The reason it's like, I envision, it's funny you call this like inside the flame, right? And you're right. Combustion's a theory and it's theoretical. And when you teach combustion, even the chart where you want good combustion is called a stoichiometric chart. It's based on the theory of perfect combustion. Well, we don't get that. So you have to go in the outsides of right. Where that is. But it's like going to a doctor, right? If a doctor were to look at you and say, hey, you're here for your annual physical. You look good. I've been doing this a long friggin' time. And, I see the color of your skin and you look great and whatever, move on. See you next year. That's the reason they do blood work, is to see what's going on behind the scenes, what's happening inside. So what an analyzer does, and what our job is to do, is to train what the numbers mean so you can decipher. Just because you have a blue flame doesn't mean that thing's running improperly. There could be other aspects that you might not know just by doing that. And to age myself, I still remember when I would go to trade shows and guys would look at the analyzer and go, oh, I do gas. I don't need that shit. And you go, no,
but wait a minute.
Yeah. So anyway, what we kind of do is, and that's, to every we travel around, go to every distributor and go to accounts, and we focus on training. So I know I shared like our training flyer that we pretty much send to everybody, and just to kind of go over some topics that it is an accredited class, and these are just some of the topics that we discuss. You'll notice at no point during this is, hey, the Novo combustion analyzer or any one of our models. It is literally the topics of combustion, what the numbers are, what the aspects, what the parameters are that you're measuring, how are they created? How do we get oxygen or CO or CO2? Sure. What do we have in the atmosphere? What is the boiler or the furnace using to make the mixture? What are the proper steps in performing an analysis? How to walk through the entire, from turning it on and taking it out of the case all the way to post-purge. How do we properly use the equipment? Where your measuring points should be, what your target reading should be, and all the safety aspects of that, and then troubleshooting and diagnostics, which is another thing, right? I mean, it's great. I have the readings. now what? That's the other
What's
thing
the
that
outcome?
what do we do from here? And then other aspects of, how guys use this as an investment in making money and using the equipment because they're properly looking at stuff, covering their liability. And then for us, one of our favorite topics is how to maintain your analyzer.
Right. How to make sure it's actually working properly.
Yeah, we deal with some of the most delicate creatures to ever walk God's green earth, as you can imagine. So we have to, we go through things like calibration and the importance of that, and servicing and emptying the water trap, because guess what? H2O is a byproduct of combustion, and you want to empty those, clean the filters, all that kind of stuff. So these are just a lot of the topics that we do. And Seitron, I'm very, very proud of what we've done as a company, because we focus so much on this that, through even this association, we've been fortunate to be nominated and also, be influential in our industry.
That's right.
For me, it was a point of pride because Dan and I just got back from the road, which we live on the road, but we just got back from the Eastern Energy Expo in Atlantic City.
Fantastic group.
Yeah, really. I mean, where I got my start, right? So, but I was the OESP Instructor of the Year last year, which means thank you, which means a lot to me. And this year I got to pass down the award to somebody else. But those are the types of, you don't get recognized or shown in industries and associations if you really don't do the things you say you're going to do. And that's kind of who we are as a company. And I love to hear from customers going, if you ever have a question, you ever have a problem, just call them. They'll answer it. That's my greatest achievement in managing people or a business, is the fact that when your customers are out there going, hey, if I have a question, I'll talk to the guys who know the answer. So that's been a really big point of pride.
Yeah, don't forget, being nominated for top 25 educators at the National HVACR Education Conference. That's really, it makes a significant point when you have manufacturers that are being recognized for the training. And that's why I'm so excited to have you guys on here to dive into the whole training side of it. Because you're right, it's easy to sell a product with good pitches. When you can teach somebody how to do things and how to become more profitable and ways to actually benefit from the investment in quality tools, it changes everything. We have a lot of instructors, I'm sure, on the program today thinking, boy, I'd love to amp up my game in the classroom, but I have to be able to justify being able to purchase new analyzers, and I'm going to need the training to make sure that I'm successful with that. Sure. And so in that, it's understanding how those tools benefit. Now, Dan, earlier we were discussing that Seitron is actually now partnered with NCI for doing, quality system training. Are you seeing contractors spending more time investing into like combustion analysis and proper training for their technicians than we have in the past?
Yeah, we have seen that. We've also seen a push from, for example, equipment manufacturers that are asking contractors to actually do a combustion test on the initial install of the equipment. Obviously, periodically, and in some cases, it may be to extend a warranty, or they may even decline a warranty, unless there's proof that the equipment has actually been installed and tested with a combustion analyzer. If you think about it, it's in their interest, right?
Absolutely. I mean, you think about like boilers, they require it for part of the commissioning. It's like, why wouldn't we do that in gas-fired appliances? We've just never gotten to that point in the industry, and I hope we do at some point. And so if you don't mind, can we dive into maybe a little bit of what someone would experience in a training class at Seitron?
Sure. Before we get into that, I just want to make one last comment on the market change, right? Yes. Because when I first started, there was 4 analyzer brands, I think, around there about 20 years ago. When we went to the AHR Expo this year, I counted 14.
Oh, wow.
So
that's crazy.
What that tells you is that the market is changing dramatically, and that everybody's trying to get into it. But from a trainer point of view, when your techs get out into the field, the likelihood of them actually having to confront a combustion analyzer now is going to be way higher than it was
even just a few years ago.
Much, much higher. And they're going to have to know how to use them, how to operate them, what the readings mean, and all that kind of stuff. So we work with a lot of tech schools, not only in education, but if we can, if we have analyzers, maybe even previous versions or anything, we rebuild and we make donations to tech schools because we want techs coming out using equipment that you are going to see in the field, and just going by eye will not suffice for a manufacturer telling you, no, I want to see CO between this range and this range, O2 between this range and this range. So I didn't want to, I'm sorry to jump in there, but
it's an important fact.
It's a matter of our market.
Yeah.
Like, it has grown leaps and bounds from even when I started, but I've only been in the industry 22 years and I've seen tremendous growth. But 10 new manufacturers from 10 or 12 years ago, that means people want to sell. There's a market to sell then.
Well, when we think about like all of the service softwares that have came to the market for
That's another one.
Sure.
Yep.
Many of those are requiring this data to be entered in on these service checks. And without an analyzer, you don't have the data to be able to put into it.
And you're liable.
You absolutely are. Another really good statistic was that 100,000 Americans went to the hospital last year due to carbon monoxide poisoning. Primarily came from our industry. It came from gas-fired furnaces and water heaters.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's something. Carbon monoxide safety is a big portion of combustion analysis and what we try to push. And you have to actually sometimes, fortunately or unfortunately, we almost have to kind of force techs to understand how important this is.
Right.
Pretend, I always say the thing, because I have children. I go, pretend that your children lived upstairs, because you're responsible for it anyway.
Mm.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think of it that way, then
right,
you second guess me just leaving this like this, because you're going to be, whether you like it or not, we're a very litigious society. So leaves, and that's why manufacturers, by the way, have now have changed the market a lot, because they're putting it in writing in the manuals with ranges and saying we're not responsible for it.
Right.
And one of the things we always focus on in our trainings is just making the point that CO safety testing is really the most important reason at the end of the day why you're using combustion analyzers, to prevent somebody from getting sick or dying from the CO poisoning as a result of a piece of equipment operating in a house or facility is always going to be the number one reason why. And you can see my slide pulling up now, but this is just one of the slides that we show on carbon monoxide, making the point that it's very toxic gas to humans and animals. You're not going to know you've been exposed to carbon monoxide until you begin to feel the health effects of that exposure. So having something that's monitoring both the indoor carbon monoxide as well as, of course, an analyzer for your flue gas emissions is important. So both ambient as well as exhaust gas is very important. Doing a combustion test at the initial install of the equipment as well as periodically. So generally once a year at minimum. A combustion system should be tested for carbon monoxide safety. In terms of the readings to look for, right? So as you see on that slide there, 0 ppm should always be your number in indoor air. Anything above 0 ppm, you should investigate what exactly is creating that concentration to increase in indoor space. And then for the actual flue gas emissions, which we'll probably go into a little further, your goal for a well-tuned combustion process should be less than 100 parts per million of CO air free. And this is some of the information that we put, on our combustion cheat sheet, as well as which we give away to all of our customers, as well as on the analyzer itself. One of those numbers shows you less than 100 ppm in the flue is going to be the number to attain in order to reduce the likelihood that a serious carbon monoxide hazard might occur.
Sorry, Dan, this is how we operate, by the way. We'll just jump in and we're both passionate about it. So
I love it.
So one of the other aspects that too many technicians fall into, especially when using an analyzer, obviously turning it on inside is never a good idea, because we're so used to, as a society, thinking, well, we got a CO detector inside, a $30 kitty detector that's sitting in the room. So if that's not going off, then there's no CO. No, the maximum allowable over a 24-hour period should be 9 ppm, 9 single digits.
All right.
If you actually read some of the units that you can pick up at Home Depot and have a quasi smoke and CO detector that I just need here for code, I mean, the first level of defense is 70 ppm over 1 to 3 hours.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
So making sure, and one of the things we try to teach guys is if you turn your analyzer on outside in fresh air when you should be, and you walk into the boiler room or to the basement or anywhere you're going, it's going to be your personal detector. So there's multiple facets to using it, but you have to know what you should be looking for in the air first of all, and not just worry about, well, the alarm's not going off, so there's nothing to worry about. No, that's not. Actually, the funny part is, if you think about it, a CO detector, a personal CO detector in a home that's hanging on the ceiling, has almost the same level of like 70 ppm is where it goes off, is almost the same level as what we should be seeing in the flue, which is under 100 ppm.
Yeah.
That's pretty crazy to think about, isn't it?
Yeah, that's acceptable. But these things are inexpensive, and there's always better solutions, but shouldn't you know what those ranges are? I mean, on an OSHA requirement over an 8-hour period is 35 ppm. So don't assume anything in our world. All this stuff, especially when it comes to combustion. Don't assume that okay, well, the alarm's not going off and so let me turn my analyzer on in here. Well, okay, you're already 2 steps behind even seeing if there was a problem.
And so go ahead.
You'd mentioned about a cheat sheet. Is that something that is available for educators?
Yes,
Oh,
absolutely.
of course.
So we can, if you like, we can share that after this.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
It's our combustion cheat sheet. So it gives you basically your typical acceptable ranges for different types, different fuel types and different designs of heating equipment.
Oh, sweet.
So it shows you your typical ranges for your oxygen, CO, CO2, flue temp, draft, all that kind of stuff. And then we also have a few diagrams for, again, different designs of equipment and where to actually place the probe, which is a very important point to go over as well.
Yeah.
For proper measurements of your draft and your carbon monoxide. So it's a good resource to have. And then, like I mentioned before, we also have added some of that data onto our analyzer. So all you got to do is review the pro mode on our instrument. You can see that data live there.
Yeah, fantastic. Because I know a lot of educators, like myself, we're technicians from the field, and many of us, when we transition to education, we have a lot to keep up with. I mean, that's the whole reason we started the show. When you were talking about, offering training, when you think about ESCO, at the heart, we are a certification and accreditation body, and we're a publisher. So, for us doing training, it's a way of extending our own resources to the industry. And with so many technologies evolving, it's really important that we stay ahead of this, because as educators, if we're not in the field using this all the time, we're not buying new tools regularly, and we can be behind on it. And so that's really what we're doing, is we're trying to make sure that you are prepared in the classroom for where the industry is and where it's going.
Yeah, absolutely. And to further a little bit on the point Jason was making a minute ago for the ambient CO, to show you guys a couple slides here. So obviously a combustion analyzer is a great tool that can be used not only for a flue gas analysis. Sorry, I'm trying to open this up here. There we go. Not only for a flue gas analysis, but also for the ambient carbon monoxide, right?
Sure.
So a lot of analyzers allow you to do this. One of the keys, though, like Jason mentioned, is doing a fresh auto zero outside. So before you even walk into a space where maybe there could be carbon monoxide, doing an auto zero calibration outside, make sure we have a true 0 ppm reading coming into the analyzer for that calibration. All right. And I just want to show you guys a quick test that I did when I was in Colorado late last year. So we had a propane forklift. For those of you who work in warehouses, you know those things spew a ton of carbon monoxide. So we had my little CO alarm was reading 85 ppm after that forklift was running in the warehouse. And so I wanted to do a test to determine what would happen if I turned one analyzer on outside fresh air and one analyzer on inside.
Ooh.
So we opened up the garage door here, right? And it actually ventilated down to about 9 ppm, which again is at ASHRAE standard. So I took both my analyzers, then we closed the garage door. It was 9 ppm inside. So I did a test.
You have a picture of that, right? Because I don't see it on the slide.
You don't see it right here?
No, you got to. Yeah, there we go.
There we go. You might hit on the slideshow and play and see if it'll go full screen for us.
Is it showing there?
No, yeah. I'm still seeing the.
Because it's showing
you're sharing.
It's showing full screen on mine.
Oh, okay. Yeah, on this side, it's still on the preview one.
Okay, I'm not sure.
It's okay. Just
yeah. Okay.
I'll blow it up later in post probably.
Okay. So yeah, basically the point here is the one on the left-hand side is the one that I auto-zeroed inside, right? So I turned that thing on in the presence of 9 parts per million of carbon monoxide. So as a result, the analyzer zeroed out that 9 ppm and now shows on the screen 0, right?
Oh, cool.
All right.
Yeah.
So now not only do I not know that there's any carbon monoxide in the air inside, but also now I've set an improper 0. So if I were to take my probe and put it in the flue of that particular analyzer, my readings for CO will now be 9 ppm less than they should accurately be.
Which is about 9%, right? If you should be 0 to 100 ppm, you're about 10% off the reading.
Correct.
So it's going to recalculate all of your readings by percentages, not just individual number. Yeah.
Yep, correct. And when the analyzer does an auto zero, it not only just does a 0 for the CO sensor, but it also calibrates the oxygen sensor to 20.9%, which is the natural concentration of oxygen in the Earth's atmosphere. But you'll notice the one on the right-hand side, if you can see it, that one was auto-zeroed outside, and then I walked inside, and immediately it's reading 9.4 ppm. So now, not only do I know that there's carbon monoxide in the indoor space, but also now I know that my analyzer will actually be reading accurately. So very important point we find a lot of guys are not doing. And I feel like at all of my trainings, there are a number of guys who, they have an epiphany after we explain this to them. But very important point, again, not only for determining if there's CO in indoor air, but also for making sure that you get accurate measurements.
I always ask the questions. This is one of the fun parts in class where you go, okay, where should we turn our analyzers on? And I always hear outside, fresh air. Okay, now where do we inside? And you're like, well, this is why. So that's just one aspect of what these things can bring to you if you know how to actually properly use them.
And it's also, even when we're outside, we have to think about, if we take a typical service fan, all right, most of our hand tools, most of our refrigeration repair components and tools are going to be on your side doors, typically, because you're using those most often. They're heaviest, they're easiest to get to through those side doors. And in the back, we're going to have shelving. We're going to keep some of our additional tools, typically like our combustion analyzer, some of our smaller box tools, typically. The last place you want to zero out that unit is at the back doors of your service van that you just shut off and still has exhaust fumes rolling around the vicinity.
Yes, sir. Or my other personal favorite is watching a guy smoke a cigarette as he's holding the analyzer.
Right.
And you just kind of staring at somebody going, really?
Yep. Hey, I see Howard just made an interesting point. If you see his comment there, just talking about how there are documented cases where professionals were charged with second-degree manslaughter, found negligent in deaths of individuals. So just to follow up on that point, if I may, real quick.
Oh yeah.
I have a slide in my presentation. Again, I'm not sure if you guys can see that full screen, but basically. Can you see that slide though?
We can see the slide.
All right. So basically, this is a situation in the state of Washington in 2021, where a couple in their 60s was found dead due to faulty installation of the condensing boiler. And when they went in to do the investigation, they found that there was 1,300 parts per million of CO in the main living space, 1,800 ppm of CO in the basement, and there were also no CO alarms in the house whatsoever. So that was, they didn't have that last line of defense to alert them of carbon monoxide. So if you can see in this picture, obviously you can see the flue entirely separated from the boiler. So all that, toxic gas that it's producing is now being vented directly back into the space instead of outside the building. Yeah. And in this case, what they found was on the initial install, instead of replacing, so they were burning propane in this place, instead of replacing the natural gas orifice which came with this piece of equipment, they did not. They left the natural gas orifice and did not replace it with one designed for propane, which therefore produced a significantly richer burning combustion process. And now there's a very high level of CO, much higher than it should have been if it was actually installed properly. So all this guy needed to do, whoever installed this, was put your probe in that little test port, take a combustion analysis, and you would have immediately seen that your readings are way higher than they should have been to ever leave this job site safely. Right. And a quick combustion analysis would have probably alerted him to the mistake. Of course, in this case, that didn't happen. And so he was actually that contractor was required to pay an $8 million settlement to the family of this couple because of they were considered
Negligence.
negligence in this case. But these are the kind of things that can happen if you're not doing a quick little combustion analysis.
Very simple one.
Yep.
I've had Chris Halschiltz from the Jenkins Foundation on a couple of our podcasts. She had unfortunately lost both of her parents at a hotel that had a pool heater improperly installed. And I didn't realize until I'd had the conversations with Chris that most commercial buildings are not required to have carbon monoxide detection in them. And so for technicians, could you think about, how many potential lives or health could be saved just by having that analyzer with you, or even just a good sensor, a detector walking into these premises? Because it amazes me how many spaces are not protected by any type of carbon monoxide.
It's great. That's also why we have a line of personal monitors too.
Yes, absolutely.
We don't ever walk into anywhere that we don't have it. Dan and I were funny walking all of our show stuff to the booth on Monday, going to set up, and this burnisher, cleaning the floors at the expo hall, drove right by us. We were pretty close, cleaning the floor, and you could go, oh man, you could smell the exhaust.
You knew it was coming out.
All of our personal detectors were going off all around us as we're carrying them in. And I go, this poor guy's been sitting on that thing probably for the last hour or two.
Right.
And he's
inhaling
a lot of that stuff. And plus people working around the area, going to and from the expo hall. So those are some of our biggest thing. Carbon monoxide is a big component of what we teach and what's there. And then we try to show guys in the theory of combustion, because sometimes we think of combustion as just this, the 3 T's, what I always learned, right? Time, temperature, turbulence, and all that. But there's much more to it. It's the reason why it's a theory or theoretical. It's chemistry. You're mixing fuels and airs, and what guys don't understand is in air you have oxygen and nitrogen, and in the fuels you have hydrogen and carbon, and all these things actually come together. And so we've seen that I jokingly, because of the flame, you're like, oh, it's got a blue flame. I don't give a shit. I don't care what it does. I've seen blue flames running at 1,000 ppm of CO. That means nothing. So, and now with condensing equipment, you can't even see the flame. It's got to run with a sealed block. So what are we actually looking at? So there's a lot to kind of go into it. And one of this example that Dan showed there, another topic we talk about in this example is the piping, because the PVC is starting to become a no-no in our industry. And one of the things why things like this can happen is you have to remember that what's coming out on the exhaust side is very acidic. Yeah. You're creating it's not just dangerous in the effect of carbon monoxide, but you're also creating things like NOx and other things that are very, very acidic. And what tends to happen is if you don't have the right venting material, that will eat at it over time. And things like this, where the sealants might have just been eaten away at and it popped off when it lit. Like, it's just, those are the types of things. So we try really hard in our industry not to just, we don't sell venting material. We're just telling you what's going on.
Man, that could actually be a whole nother conversation just on proper vent pipe installation and materials. I haven't thought about that, but I've noticed a lot of jurisdictions being very, very particular with their material list.
Yeah, on the exhaust side for sure.
Exhaust.
Because when condensing equipment first started coming into the market, it was we still sometimes thought of it as plug and play, which they're not, and actually they're touchier than just an atmospheric furnace or a boiler. And then we started plugging it in, and we're one of the only countries that allow like PVC to be used and other things. In fact, it's gonna be okay. But our Italians, because we're an Italian company, and they'll ask, and they'll go, Jason, why do you use shit pipe on the exhaust? And you go, yeah, because it's for plumbing.
Right.
And then when we're in the class, and I'll go, hey guys, what aisle do you go pick up PVC Schedule 40? Plumbing. What's the max temperature of Schedule 40? And it's like blank stare sometimes. And you go, well, do you know a boiler and a furnace that runs above 140 degrees? It's the max temperature, not the operating temperature. So, and then what you're creating in there. So, there's not just let's make sure the CO is good. It starts to get into other aspects of installation and proper service of equipment over time that plays a role and affects.
Yeah, it's funny. I was
like
talking to a boiler manufacturer this week at the Eastern Energy Expo, and one of the comments that he made was, when we get a call from a contractor saying that one of their boilers isn't working, one of the first things that he asks them is to send a picture of the venting, right? So send a picture of the entire installation as well as the exhaust and the fresh air intake.
Yep.
Is the exhaust too close to the fresh air intake? Are you pulling corrosive exhaust gas back in? Cross contamination. Flue gas recirculation accidentally, which can obviously cause a lot of issues.
Right. That's a big problem in our industry. And if you see in this picture where even on the intake, you'll see another test port on the intake. It's for two reasons. Number one, if you're doing proper combustion analysis, you want to know what your primary air temperature is. So you have to make sure not only do you have the probe in the stack taking your stack temperature and your byproducts of combustion, we have a separate probe that goes into the air intake to take your true delta T between those two parts. Because that's why every analyzer you own has a stack temperature, air temperature, delta T. They all the numbers on your analyzer mean something, or else you would only take stack temp, and that's sometimes one of those things that's all we think about. That's one. The other aspect of having that test port in the intake is what Dan just mentioned. If you zero out your analyzer outside in fresh air and you walk into a system, instead of putting my probe in the stack, I'm just going to put it in the end. Yeah, put it in the return. See if I get any byproducts of combustion at all. Because if you do, then you're getting recirc or recirculation. Whereas that's one of the things that manufacturers will ask, because it's one of the biggest issues that we see in the field.
I actually witnessed that as a young technician. It made me rethink fuels very significantly. We had a farmhouse in Franklin, Indiana. I can very vividly remember. I mean, this is 25-ish years ago, almost 25. And the homeowner was, having some problems with the furnace not lighting. And as soon as I took the cover off, I recognized that all of the interior of the burner box was extremely rusted. And I said, well, have you had problems with this? Yeah, they replace the burners about every 3 or 4 years. I went, wait a minute. And so that was before I actually got into combustion analysis. And so I fired things back up and did a temperature differential across the flue pipes and went, wait a minute. It's 20 degrees outside, not 60.
Yeah.
And realizing that, that's exactly what we're doing, is bringing those acidic gases right back into our clean combustion air. And that was, corroding this burner box. So on LP in particularly, it, has a significant amount of moisture, and now it's an acidic moisture. Yeah. And that delta T is a very, very simple way of determining if you're bringing in any of that combustion, that exhaust air.
Sure.
Very cool.
Yeah, and you can, with some analyzers, you have dual type K thermocouple inputs. So, for example, you can have a thermocouple, obviously, in the flue with your normal sampling probe, but you can have a secondary probe in that fresh air intake for that accurate delta.
Exactly.
Some allow you to actually plug in the temperature too, so you can.
Yeah, you can type it in as well.
You could type it in.
But the way your typical combustion analyzer works is it's taking your current room air temperature and then subtracting that from the stack temperature, right? So if you don't have that secondary step of actually either typing it in or measuring that fresh air intake, you're going to throw off that delta T. Could be pretty considerably. Which then obviously goes into your efficiency equation.
Again, one of those things that we go over in analyzer is a lot more than just a testing piece of equipment and putting it in the stack and we got the numbers. So what do those all mean and why, right? From your O2 to CO to temperatures, where you should be taking them, where on a I always make the analogy that, you have two boilers or two furnaces. One is an atmospheric 80%er, one's a 90%er. The objective or the idea is to do the same thing, right? Just like both my wife and I, we're both humans, but we run differently, which means that we get tested differently. Same thing with a piece of equipment. A furnace running 90%, I mean, the draft is different. The temperatures are different. There's so much different. But if we just take an analyzer and plug it in and do the same test that we did before, we're not really taking everything that into account for that system. So that's kind of, a lot of what we go over in especially live fire training.
And one of the things that we also find is, improper probe placement too, right?
Yeah.
So there's lots of different types of equipment out there, ages of equipment. And so proper probe placement to get an actual undiluted, because that's what you want, is an undiluted flue gas sample, right? If we don't have an undiluted flue gas sample, then we don't have a accurate sample. So a few of the things to consider are, number one, is you want to have your probe placement be midway into the flue. Right. So typically you'll take your combustion analyzer probe, touch the back wall of the flue pipe, and then draw it back about halfway. So it's situated right in the center. And then obviously most analyzers have a little probe stop or positioning cone that you can use to plug up that test port. So you can use the analyzer hands free. And then another important point is, you want to try to have that probe placement be about at least 1 flue pipe diameter away from any elbows in the venting. Because the closer you are to an elbow, the more turbulent the flue gases, can be routing that corner. So it might be a little more difficult for you to have stabilized readings, especially for your draft and your oxygen, carbon monoxide, CO2, unless you're more of a straight flue pipe, not close to an elbow. And then, we also, in part of our training, we go over lots of different specific examples of equipment. So, for example, a very common thing that we see guys doing incorrectly is for atmospheric hot water tanks, right? So we find that oftentimes guys are taking a combustion test above the draft hood, when in reality, the proper probe placement for combustion is beneath the draft hood. And then if you're taking your draft measurement, it's above the draft hood. So we actually have a new accessory for our analyzer that allows you to do a simultaneous test for your combustion readings beneath the draft hood and then your draft above the draft hood all at the same time.
We can thank NCI for that one.
Yeah. So that's part of the NCI protocol to see those two things consecutively.
Yeah, very cool. I hadn't really thought about that, but yeah, it makes sense.
And in some cases, if you can't get the probe far enough down into the combustion chamber, you can actually drill a hole into the draft hood because it's negatively pressurized. So you don't have to worry about flue gas spillage in that case, assuming you don't have the blocked chimney or something.
Right.
But that is a acceptable way to do it, is to drill a hole into the draft hood to actually get your probe far enough down that you're getting that undiluted flue gas measurement. And then
we have these for like every piece of equipment.
Right.
Really?
So it's funny that when we get to this part of our presentation, usually or our trainings, we'll go, guys, I'm not going to go through every one of these things. Pick one and we'll go through
Focus
something.
on it.
And then what we've done is that's why we have the cheat sheets that we provide, because we pretty much put this information into a 1-page cheat sheet of different systems with different ranges. And
Very
then
cool.
what we did, not to push our product, but the one thing we did in our new unit was we made this information now digital on the analyzer. So
Really? The equipment selection?
Yep. So now you can, when you have one of the instruments, like Dan is showing a picture there, I don't know if you could really see it that well, but it's got what we call a green range or an acceptable combustion range, where you select the fuel that you're burning and then you select the type of equipment, and you literally just got to follow the ranges that you see on the screen to kind of dial it in for good combustion.
Okay.
So there's an adage in our business: the easier I can make it, the more likely you are to do it. The more likely you are to do it, the better the more tests you'll do. The more tests you do, the better equipment runs. The better equipment runs, the better our market becomes. But we have to get, how do we make it easier, right? So that's kind of the process.
Yeah. I did have one question that came in from Todd, and this is very relevant. Todd lives in an area that I don't know how much gas they actually see if we were on a natural draft style. If we were working on a natural draft hood and we actually drilled that, do you have any recommendations for sealing that up? Or do we even have to, since it's on the negative side of a draft?
Yeah, so I would say that because it's negative, I mean, technically it's not necessary, but I do actually think it is good practice because oftentimes obviously let's make a distinction, right? If it's a condensing appliance, which is positively pressurized, now you will have flue gas spillage out of that measurement point. So in that case, yes, 100%, it should be plugged. But it is good practice for any piece of equipment, drilling a hole in an event, to plug it up, because homeowners oftentimes will get worried if they see
Right.
the hole in their draft cord or their flue pipe. So I would say definitely it is a good recommendation to do so. Lots of guys will use high temperature silicone.
Yeah.
Glue, for example. We also sell high temperature silicone tapered flue plugs.
Mhm.
You can use to plug up that test port as well.
Very cool.
Yeah, I don't like PVC for a lot of different reasons, but on the condensing side, because we always had to plug those up. When you did have that, it was really easy to just take a bolt or a nut and kind of tap it, because it taps into the PVC material, and then it's blocked. But high temperature tape, all that kind of stuff. And Dan's right. I mean, we provide and we sell these little high temperature silicone plugs that just plug right in. They're tapered for different sizes. And then next time you want to take a test, you unplug it and do your test.
Are those on the website?
I don't think they're on the website, but
Okay.
we do have information on it if anybody's interested.
Okay, and for that website too, for anyone who wants to check things out as we're going along or to come back later, you can go to SeitronAmericas.com or Seitron.com, and you'll get to that that homepage as well. And I got a QR code too if anyone wants that. That'll be an easy way to access that from like a mobile device if you're watching and want to check that out later. Stored into the video as well.
So
Cool.
Dan, do me a favor. Can you real quick before can you pull up the screen with the stoichiometric curve? This is like my favorite thing in combustion, because this is kind of what combustion is in essence. When we look at a stoichiometric curve, for the most part, and it's one of those things where there's a balance between all of the things your analyzer reads: O2, CO, CO2, and those levels and ranges that we give you for different equipment, for different fuels, and all that kind of stuff. And even I showed you on the newer analyzers where you have that kind of green phase. And depending on what you're doing, it's all different. So this curve shifts a little bit. But at no point is it about flame color, even though there's a variety of different flame colors there, because it doesn't really matter. The ranges of O2 and CO, and every analyzer pretty much calculates CO2 based on the oxygen and the type of fuel that you have. That's another misconception we get all the time where, guys call us and the first thing they ask us about is CO2, or if a sensor dies, my CO2 went out. I go, there is no CO2 sensor. Almost every analyzer is based on
Calculating.
It's calculating based on the oxygen. But there's certain points and levels that each different fuel and each different piece of equipment want to be at. And what we're trying to do and what a manufacturer is trying to do when they give you those ranges is to be in the green, like you see here, a green zone, where my CO could be at its lowest point. But even if I know it's hard to see here, but we show it in class, where even if it scales up a little bit, it's okay, because you're good up to 100 ppm. And where O2 and CO2 kind of curve at the top to make it not only the safest way, but also the most efficient. And if you're off by a percent point, it can drop your efficiency pretty well. So all of those little numbers that you get that comes with combustion analysis, they all mean something to get the equipment to run safely and to run efficiently.
Very cool. I'm about to sit in a class sometime. I mean, be honest, combustion analysis is not one of my strong points. I worked with gas appliances a lot early on in my career, but then I spent most of it in refrigeration. And I imagine many instructors are this way, where, it's something that we need education on. How often are you doing these classes?
Is an answer like too often an answer?
So at our Seitron Academy, I mean, we do, how many a year do you think?
We probably average twice a month here, and that's only because we're on the road so often. We're Dan, myself, Kevin, our other we call ourselves sales managers and stuff, but we're not. We're trainers first, with a lot of experience in this, and the sales come later. You train first, and guys will if you are trustworthy and you're good at what you do, and guys understand what you're trying to achieve, they might not buy an instrument from you today, but they'll think about it 10 years from now. But or a year from now, excuse me. But our goal is to go, if somebody's interested in having us come out and do a training, I don't care where you are in the country, just ask us. the likelihood of us probably being in your area is pretty good at some point. We kind of cover all of North America, Canada included, from here. And Dan is very, very well, he speaks Spanish fluently. So he can even do it in Spanish, and he's going to Mexico this year for HR Mexico. So look, we're a very personable company. We want to be out there training. So if you or whether it's at your training facility, for your techs, for whatever you want, reach out to us. If we can't be there, we'll do an online training if need be. I mean, just use us. We're here for it.
Yeah, no, that's really cool, because I'm sure we'll have some of the larger schools that, may have a dozen educators. And if we could, have contacts to do a training to get everyone up to speed, that's really an ideal scenario, especially for those that are looking to update their equipment and
Sure.
ready for some new combustion analyzers. Why not get the manufacturer in for proper education on not just the tools, but the fundamentals behind
Sure.
what the tools are doing.
Yeah,
Sure.
between myself, Jason, and Kevin, I mean, we do a few hundred trainings a year. I mean, in-person trainings. I mean, on a typical, we cover the whole country too. So on a typical trip, I mean, sometimes we're doing 10 training classes during that, that single week. It all depends on the time of year and that kind of thing. But we do a lot.
Sounds like it. Fantastic. There's one question that came in from Todd. I'm not sure if this is in your wheelhouse on the PVC pipe, or if that's a question for another discussion sometime about flue-rated PVCs like the AST.
Shoot.
Let me just bring that one up. Todd gets kind of deep sometimes.
I tell everybody who comes to a class, this is going to be interactive, or else I'm just going to start asking questions. So, no, I'm not a fan of PVC. Understandable, considering issues with porcelain. You share the same concerns when it comes to rated PVC. Now, obviously, not as much, because it's kind of the old. Well, who rated? I mean, personally,
Designed for.
Yeah, I'm just okay. So it can take higher temperature. That's why we have like in our training facility here, we use one of the companies that we use is like Seitron, where it's polypropylene. It's specific material for flue. Some of these other rating, you get the rating for the higher temperatures, which, by the way, Schedule 80 has higher temperatures too. But not everybody just rates it for also the acidity and everything else that's going on in the flue process. And by the way, depending on the fuel that you're burning, it changes as well. And then how much moisture do you have? What elevation? What? There's a few other questions. I mean, it's better than Schedule 40.
Right, exactly.
But would I use it? Probably not.
Yeah, a lot of jurisdictions will not even allow it, and especially those that are north of the U.S. border. Like when we talk about using PVC for flue pipe, standard Schedule 40 in Canada, they're like, "Eh?"
Yeah, no. That's like our European, obviously they no, not stainless. It depends. Well, if it's an 80%er, I mean, sure. But a 90%er, I would recommend polypropylene. I mean, Central Therm is one manufacturer, but there's other manufacturers. And if you'd like some links, I'm happy to share them. But like if you look at, I'll try showing it here, but there's a boiler sitting over there with Central Therm as venting that we take outside. And we actually will show it at our class. We bring some piping, some poly, because this is a question that gets asked. So we literally take a piece of pipe and it's got a test port to it, and we show the polypropylene. And there's no glues. There's no cement. There's no nothing. It's all sealed with gaskets. Mm-hmm. It's not only rated for the temperature, but for the materials. So that's the recommendation. By the way, if you ask most of the manufacturers, they're kind of starting to go that way too.
I've seen that a lot in installation manuals here recently. So,
yes.
Yeah, I see that as a changing item in our industry.
For sure.
Cool. Any questions? We still got just about 5 or 6 more minutes left. Anyone in the audience have anything they want to dive deeper? I mean, you got 131 slides. You guys are like men after my own hearts of building training material. You overbuild and you grab what you need.
Yeah, that's pretty much how we do it. And so we, usually we'll have a slide for anything that kind of comes up. And as I mentioned to you before, I mean, Dan and I are always hey, I got a new one. Let's keep adding. And then all of a sudden, because it was 100 a year ago, now it's 131.
Right.
So, but we try to keep our trainings to 2-3 hours if we can, because we do sometimes have to do these multiple times a day.
Sure.
But we do go over quite a lot of things, not just what is O2, what is CO, what is CO2, what should the ranges be, this type of equipment, this type of venting is obviously a topic of conversation, even though, look, I don't work for a manufacturer of venting material. I'm not trying to push any type of different material. This is what we see, and this is the conversations that we have. And there's just like a CO detector. Why is it by code in certain states to put a CO detector, but then we go out to the store and buy a $20 kitty detector and think that that's it? No, just because that's what we've done doesn't mean that there isn't better solutions, exactly. Right? There isn't better materials, better way of doing things, all that kind of stuff. As an industry, all across the board, we just have to know that it's there and have the conversation. So, checking for cracked heat exchangers on furnaces too. We just launched a new feature on some of our analyzers that actually walk you through the process and then show you that if they detect a crack or not, because how we used to teach it, now we can, just like we did on the other features, is how do I make it easier to do and help our guys with finding issues and looking for concerns, but also what's the proper procedures on how to use an analyzer, what's the test I'm looking for, whether it's draft or gas pressure or any types of those things. But I also selfishly want to get away from, hey, I'm having a problem. Okay, what's your gas pressure? It's good.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, that doesn't help us.
Good is an opinion, not a measurement.
Yeah. Right, exactly. Yeah. on that point that Jason mentioned too, I think it's just worth having a quick, a mention of, that cracked heat exchanger testing, right? So,
yeah, please do.
Obviously, one of the most important, analyzers are great tools for diagnosis and troubleshooting, right? You have a built-in CO monitor for ambient air as well as for the flue gas emissions. You have O2 and CO built-in sensors. You have type K thermocouples for differential pressure, temperature. You have a built-in manometer for differential pressure, gas pressure, draft. So there's lots of different tests you can perform with an analyzer. And obviously one of those things that can help you to diagnose, it could be a cracked heat exchanger. So if there, for example, is a cracked heat exchanger that leads to a carbon monoxide hazard in a building, right? The only published standard that you're going to see out there is what I have up on that screen right there. So it's the AHRI Guideline X 2023. So if there was a carbon monoxide hazard, they're going to bring in some industry professional who's going to look at what exists out there. And the AHRI, the ASHRAE standard, is what you would look at. And in this standard, they give you a number of steps to follow to potentially diagnose a cracked heat exchanger. So part of this process, as you can see there, is number one, look for flame disturbances. So if you see any major flame disturbance as the blower kicks on, it could suggest you're pulling air into the heat exchanger, therefore increasing, potentially your oxygen concentration. But also you'd see that visual flame disturbance at that point. Step two is measuring carbon monoxide in the airstream, right? So doing an ambient CO test, testing the supply and the return for potential carbon monoxide, and then determining if maybe there's something in the ambient space that's allowing CO into the airstream, or maybe it's the furnace itself that is producing carbon monoxide and venting it back in. And on that point also, one thing that we find a lot of guys doing is using improper equipment. So if a lot of guys are testing, just the supply for carbon monoxide with a low cost CO detector that's not actually temperature compensated. And if you do that, it's going to start to read carbon monoxide. In fact, we got a call from a guy a couple weeks ago, and I told him, don't use that, use your analyzer. He did that, and now he's getting 0 ppm. So it's important to make sure you're using the right testing equipment for this kind of stuff as well. And then things like doing your normal flue gas analysis, right? So the ASHRAE standard says less than 200 ppm, should be your goal in this case. Verifying proper installation, so things like proper vent sizing, proper gas orifice, gas input, your manifold pressure, all the proper tests to make sure that it's actually installed as per the manufacturer specs and any local codes. And then lastly is that visual inspection. So if you do find that could be a problem based off of one of the initial steps, then the visual inspection with disassembly is the best way, the only way to truly verify if indeed you may have a crack. So that's the AHRI standard. So I would definitely, it's a 5-page, I believe, document that you can download for free as a PDF. So I would tell everybody to at least have knowledge of this standard and print it out for yourselves if you're doing, industrial furnace.
And by the way, anybody who comes to a class or we do a training for, we give them copies of our presentation and all as a combustion book. I mean, we give them as much detail and information as we can. We in 2 or 3 hours sometimes. I mean, we're a manufacturer. We have to be on the road and selling equipment sometimes, but we want to give them as much detail and information as we possibly can from everywhere.
Very cool. Yeah, so especially as educators, you're looking to sharpen your skills on combustion analysis and using tools properly. We want you to spend a little time getting to know Seitron better. They're a fantastic friend of ours and partner in education. You'll see a lot more of them at our conference, and you'll just see more of us doing training together. So I encourage you to reach out to them, learn a little bit more. Hop in with us next week. We're going to be doing, we're going to be doing a live A2L system installation, going over best practices for a A2L. It's actually going to be a cold climate heat pump dual fuel installation. So maybe we'll regroup and do an actual combustion analysis on that project later in the year, and we'll do some hands-on instruction and guidance with that. And make sure that you come back and watch these videos and subscribe to our channels. I'm doing a promo right now, trying to build up our audience on YouTube. We've been spending so much time on LinkedIn and our website and some of our other social channels. So we're trying to really build up the YouTube right now. And so, make sure to hit subscribe. Join us on our future episodes. Look forward to hanging out with everybody. And guys, I thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Clifton.
Thank you very much for having us. And if we didn't answer any questions that you might still have, reach out to us. We're available.
That's exactly right. All right, everyone. We'll see you again next week on Did You Know, the ESCO HVAC show. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.